Welcome to Against the Tide, the podcast where extraordinary social change makers share their stories and their wisdom. Against the Tide is a celebration of courageous women who create lasting impact by daring to forge their own path. We'll dive deep into powerful themes such as the complexity of identity and how it influences the choices we make, embracing change even when it feels uncomfortable, and how breaking free from labels can unlock your true potential. Join me, Jo Metcalf, to hear stories of incredible women who, by swimming against the tide, prove that extraordinary things can happen. This episode features Minoti, founder of TPL Experiences and community artist. So today I'm speaking to Minoti, a community artist and founder of TPL Experiences, a value-led consultancy that help medium and larger organisations build inclusive cultures. Minoti grew up in India, where she went on to break barriers as one of the first women presenters in motorsport and has since built a new life and business in the UK. In this conversation, we'll talk about identity, belonging, and the courage it takes to champion yourself when no one else does. Minoti, we met through a mutual connection, and I'm so pleased to have you on the podcast today because I love to talk to you about lots of different things, and particularly about values. And I'm excited to talk to you today, particularly about failure, which is really interesting. I can't wait to share your perspective with our listeners, but we'll first jump into your understanding, your background. You were born in India, the third of three daughters. How has that shaped your sense of identity?
Firstly, it's great to be here as well, Jo. I think I've been looking forward to this conversation because I loved talking to you as well. The difference is we are behind microphones today. I think being born and raised in a family where I was the third girl child has subconsciously massively shaped the way I see myself, massively shaped the way I assume people are seeing me. And I think you don't kind of understand the relevance of these things until you're probably slightly older and you start looking at people around you, you start hearing conversations that your parents have with the extended family in terms of what it is like to have three girls. But I distinctly remember when I was born, I think there was this whole sort of almost this grieving period that extended family had because, mom and dad got unlucky and had the third child as a girl as well. So I think from that instance, obviously I was unaware about that, but I guess from that instance, subconsciously, it's been a massive barrier and or opportunity that has helped shape myself and who I see myself as. And while growing up as well, mom and dad would always get the ever so often, so all your girls are going to get married off and then, y'all both are going to be alone. And I think to my absolute luck, I do feel like sometimes previous births, if you do believe in that, previous births do somehow create your luck in present birth, because I think I got really lucky with my parents, both mom and dad, although came from extremely traditional backgrounds in terms of their own families. Both of them were quite rebellious as individuals themselves. Both of them came from really small villages in India, relocated to a big city like Mumbai to make their lives. And I think that's really helped me also set my own boundaries, create my own version of ambition, because outside of the sort of family unit, everybody else always almost told us off in terms of three girls, what are y'all going to do, which, career option you're going to take. And even then with the career option, it was more like, well, do it for a few years, but then you'll get married off eventually. And, but then outside of that, internally within my family unit, that's mom and dad and three of us, there was this awareness that, you've got to create your own identity. You've got to be really proud of who you are, what you do, how you serve people around you. And so I guess that emotion or that mindset that you are here beyond your gender was brought to me by my parents. And I think the fact that I was the third girl child just subconsciously made me work that much more harder, because I felt like nobody was telling me this, but I just felt like I had to prove myself. I had to prove myself more than any other person, because, that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm here to tell people, that being a girl, being the third girl child is actually a great thing. And regardless of the gender I identify myself with, as an individual, I am here to give something, and I am here to be good at something. So yeah, it massively impacted my sense of identity. So yeah, massively impacted sense of identity, yeah.
And you talked a few times in there about proving yourself.
Yeah.
Who were you proving yourself to?
It's funny, right? Because I think when you're growing up, you create this almost this mental calculator with people around you, your peers, your extended family, your cousins, and all of that you feel like, oh, I've got to match up. Nobody's told you to match up, but society kind of tells you that, oh, well, if you're not good enough in studies, then you might just land up doing an okay job. Well, that's okay, So there's always that external pressure that you set yourself against. It's only over time, as you get more mature, as you probably realize that people's perception about you will keep changing depending on the room you are sat in. Till date, I feel like I enter rooms where everybody knows who I am and values what I am and what I can bring. And then there are rooms that I feel like I'm not fit for, and I don't feel included, or I don't feel belonged, or I don't feel like I can add any value. But then I'm not sitting down and thinking, well, I don't think I'm great enough. And, because now I know, I've probably become more sensible, and now I know that the validation of who I am, what I can do, the value that I can add is an internal piece for me to do and explore, and not an external piece. But growing up, it was very much like, what will everybody else talk about? When we started a extremely unconventional career path, like being a Master of Ceremonies, we didn't even know there was a career like that. We didn't even know that people talking on a microphone on stage are called Master of Ceremonies. So kind of getting into that space raised a lot of eyebrows around us in the society that we lived in. Not in a regressive way, but in a sort of almost limiting what our ambition could look like. And so even then, I think it became a thing that I need to prove them wrong. But once you start your journey, and then over time, you realize that actually I don't need to prove anything to anybody, because people around me will consistently and constantly change. And I want them to change, because that's when I know I'm growing. And so I can't sit and attach myself to somebody else's perception about me. I've got to sit with myself and ask myself the difficult questions, that who I am, what do I bring, how do I add value, how am I creating an impact? And I think that proving then over the years stops being an external piece and becomes an internal piece. But I think when you're just starting off, I think I would probably be lying if I say, oh, I'd got it all sorted and I was always into an internal piece. It kind of starts externally, and then eventually you find your way and be like, that's all noise. And you've got to switch it off at some point to really grow as an individual.
Fantastic. It sounds like you really champion yourself now. So what does it mean to you now to champion yourself, and how do you practice that?
I think I practice it by making sure that I get myself into uncomfortable situations, really. I practice it by challenging myself in terms of what I can do. I think obviously the upside is that, you know, there are times when people around you also are like, yeah, you can absolutely do that, Minoti. You should do this. But the downside is that nobody else is convinced about it other than you, you know. So it can pan out in two extremely different ways. But I think for me, championing myself today really means saying yes to more opportunities, saying yes to things that make me uncomfortable. Because in my head, I think I have created enough mechanisms and systems to allow me to understand that the thing that's nagging me and saying, no, don't do it, is just my fear, fear of the unknown that every human being has. So I think for me, just having that realization and knowing that, okay, I will say yes. There are two things that will happen out of it. Either I will get a yes from the other person, or I'll get a no thank you from the other person. But in either cases, I don't want to sit here and regret not even trying. So I think for me, my championing is very little to do with proving who I am to anybody external. It's very much about just making sure that I consistently challenge myself to get into uncomfortable situations, to push my own boundaries, my own limits, so that I grow as an individual and so that I continuously be a learner for life. And all of that can only exist when you just give yourself the chance, regardless of the result. And that's what I guess my intention or my mindset is. It's never about that end result. It's more about, let's just see what happens, you know? we'll play it out.
I love this sort of chill sort of vibe. That's fantastic. We'll jump into some of that a little bit more if that's okay. Thinking about the theme of swimming against the tide. You've described failure as exciting and transformative. Can you tell me about how you came to that perspective?
Yeah, I think as a psychology geek, I'm very fascinated with how the brain responds to fear and failure and rejection. So in the past 6-7 years, I would say I've really worked on understanding more about it. But if I were to look at my own life in terms of the professional chances that I've taken, I don't think at any point in time anybody looked at my career graph and said, oh, well, that's a conventional route, you know, because I completed my master's in psychology with a focus on human behavior. So I think in that sense, the stage was set for me to move in a very different direction of, you know, becoming a part of an HR team in an organization and all of that. But I obviously took a complete U-turn and I decided to venture into a very unknown territory of being a Master of Ceremonies. And I think my first few attempts at being a Master of Ceremonies were quite embarrassing. You know, I wasn't very good at my job, but I had people who gave me chances, and thank you for that. But I think from the very beginning of my career, I almost tasted what it was like to fail, what it was like to not be good at something. And then from there, when I started venturing into television, for instance, you do have to give a lot of auditions. Anybody who is familiar with any part of the TV industry will know that it's an extremely competitive sector. Back in India, it was and continues to be a competitive sector. We are too many people, so every profession is very competitive. But you get used to going for auditions and you get used to being called and be like, sorry, you didn't make it. You know, sorry, we're going with somebody else. And every time that call comes to you, you're just getting slightly more stronger. You're becoming slightly more resilient. You're becoming okay with hearing no thank you. But then when you come to a new country and you don't know anybody, you don't have any friends, any family, and you have to start all over again, you again have to familiarize yourself with what it was to knock on many doors and get a no thank you. And so I guess, again, in that sense, I feel like that rejection and the amount of rejection that I got when I relocated to this country, I don't think I would have probably taken it the way I did if I hadn't had that initial exposure of constant, no, thank you, you know. So I guess in that sense, I think failure is very exciting because failure allows you to, failure allows you to give yourself a chance. Nobody else will give you a chance if you don't give yourself a chance. So failure allows you to do that. It allows you to give yourself a chance to learn, to experiment, to grow. B, it allows you to be in spaces and meet people that can completely change the trajectory of your life, because you've given yourself that permission that the worst that will happen is I won't like this place and people won't like me, but let me try anyway. So that mindset of giving something a go is something that failure teaches you a lot. And I think, for me, I feel like failure has probably also helped me not take myself too seriously, which I think is probably something we kind of miss out on as we become older and, as we get set in our ways. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So much in there. We'll touch on some of those areas actually as we go through. But what's the biggest failure you're glad you had?
I have a long list there, Joe. My
Just
biggest
one.
failure.
Yeah, just one.
My biggest failure, I think, I guess my biggest failure would probably be, well, in hindsight, failure or not, would probably be when I started my job as a sports presenter in India. I think why I count that as my biggest failure is because I very easily forgot everything that I'd learned about failure. And I remember at the end of season 1, because it didn't go as per plan and because, I was being shunned because I'm a woman and because I was the only woman on the field and tracks, etc. I was being completely shunned, completely isolated. And so I think I made up my mind. I'd forgotten everything that I've just spoke about. And I'd made up my mind that this is not the space for me. And I know I've worked hard to get this position, but I'm not going to stick with it. And I'm going to give up because people don't like me here. And I think I'd allowed external opinions to kind of make that decision for me. And I remember going to my producer and saying, thank you very much. This was great. Not great, but great. Season 1, I'm not going to be joining you in season 2, unfortunately. And I remember he looking at me and being like, but why? It's like, can't you see, nobody likes me, or I'm treated like, this extra person. The writers are not wanting to stand next to me because I am a woman, which all sounded so frivolous and so, just so bizarre. And I remember you looking at me and saying that, okay, so you're basically quitting because everybody else around you thinks you're not worth being on this track. And I remember giving him this very dirty look because I'm like, I know you're speaking the truth, but I don't want to listen to this truth. And kind of going back to my hotel room and saying, I'll think about it. And then calling my mom I was in Bangalore at that point, calling her and being like, this is what the producer told me. And she's like, you've really hated this journey. You've been miserable every time you've come back from the location. Do you really want to give it another go and kind of continue with that misery? Or do you want to just say, what, no, thank you, this is not for me? And I remember kind of almost being at that verge of saying, no, thank you. But then almost also at the same time instantly saying, I want to prove this person wrong. And I want to prove to him that I'm not quitting a show because, people around me don't like me. But I think I would probably consider that failure because I kind of failed to listen to my own self and to everything that I'd learned over the years. And I very quickly, allowed external voices to influence my journey and to influence my worth, define my worth. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that's always etched in my memory, that I'll always go back to that moment whenever I have a challenging situation to deal with in life, even today, and think about that track and that conversation with the producer and be like, what, okay, I'm gonna internally talk myself into maybe giving myself one more try, and not kind of getting bogged down by that rejection or external rejection, as it were. So yeah, but I do have lots on the list, but I'll stick to one as told.
No, that's really interesting. I'm interested about when you're in those situations, what is that inner voice saying to you?
I think the inner voice is talking me down. I'm not gonna lie and be like, oh, I've worked it out in life, because I think as human beings we're all flawed, and we all have our moments of weakness. Uh, I think the game changing factor in all of this is what you do with that voice, what you do with that flaw in that sense. So even till date, just last week, in fact, I heard some news that I didn't want to hear in terms of an opportunity that we missed out on as a business, and it hit me like the first reaction was, why? We worked so hard for it. And so it's very normal, I think, to think like that, and very normal to kind of get into a bit of a dark space where you start blaming yourself, where you start feeling like, oh, only if I'd sent that email 2 days before, or only if I'd asked them for an extra conversation. And you start doing this, double guessing yourself, which still happens with me. And I think it'll probably continue to happen with me. But I think the thing that probably has made that change, or allows you to make that change, is then you let the first thought pass you. You sit with it. You don't resist it. I don't resist it. I let it come into my system. I let it sit in with me, and then it just passes by itself. And that's when I start talking and doing a bit of self-reflection in terms of, did I give it my best shot? Did I ask the right questions? Could I have done anything different? What would I do if I was given this opportunity again? And there itself, I feel like, okay, we didn't get that opportunity, or I didn't make it to that final list, but I have learned something in the process. I'll make a note of these learnings, and I'll make sure that I revisit them or reflect on them again. So I think what I'm trying to say is that, yes, you can come up with these amazing reframes, and you can, have these amazing quotes in your room, which I do. I have many positive quotes around in my study. But I think sometimes it's just about maybe allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to feel rubbish about something. Yeah.
Inspiring. You've talked quite a bit around putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and this sense of not always belonging in those spaces.
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that message around not feeling like you belong somewhere, or being told that you don't belong?
Yeah, it's a fascinating theme, right? Feeling belonged, and feeling included. I think coming from India, when I reached UK, and when I started my life in this country, I didn't really ever think of concepts like feeling belonged, because for me, I think I was so driven by my work in my life that I was very ambitious about making an impact and creating change within the organizations I worked with. And obviously, I guess the context was very different, because I think I moved in those spaces as me myself, as in Minoti, being a consultant, working with sort of these large global organizations, looking at these massive change programs and consultancy programs. So I think I always identified myself as Minoti, and there was no question about that ever. But I think when I relocated here, and when I started coming under different spaces like women of color, and women from the global majority, and first generation migrant, and all of that, I think that's when the question of, oh wow, do I fit here? Do I belong here? That's when it really hit me. And it's going to be very different for every individual, I guess, regardless of who you are, where you come from, what your cultural background is, what gender you identify with. Regardless of all of that, I do feel that there will always be some rooms that you belong to a lot more than other rooms, and there's nothing wrong in it. I think as long as we know the value that we can bring into a space, the change that we can facilitate, I think that's the most important. at least for me. And so even today, I think when I look at, a lot of times people ask me, especially when I go back home in India, my friends or my relatives will be like, so which is home? Is it India or is it Leeds? And it's a very interesting question for me, because I feel like actually I belong to both. I don't think as a human being I want to be restricted at where I belong. I belong in Leeds because I do incredible work with incredible people, and I feel very belonged. I belong. I feel that belong that I feel like I can. I really want to change how the world looks at Leeds and how the world looks at West Yorkshire, and that's how passionate I feel about the community and the city and the county I live in and I work in. But at the same time, when I go back to my home with my mom, I feel belong there as well, because that's where I've grown up and that's my childhood and I have lots of memories there. And so I think sometimes I myself kind of sit with it in a bit of a confused state, that am I supposed to belong to only one place and one country, or can I belong to more than one place? And does belonging really have to be physical? The more I have experienced life and worked with different communities, the more I've realized that actually you get that sense of belonging because of the people you surround yourself with, regardless of where you're surrounding yourself with those people. And so I think when I see myself, when I see people like me, I think that question of belonging is always an important one. But I also feel that it allows us to maybe, be slightly more ambitious about what we mean when we say that, do I belong or do I feel belonged? And maybe belonging is much more nuanced, much more emotionally driven rather than physically driven, and kind of being belonged in a specific physical space. But even having said that, I do feel like there are sometimes I'll sit in certain rooms where I know that I don't fit in. Not because of the color of my skin, not because of my accent, but I just don't fit in. I don't have anything to offer. And that is okay too. I mean, I don't really need to fit in every room. I'm okay not fitting into some rooms as long as I'm fitting into some others and making that change. So I think sometimes it's also about giving yourself that permission to maybe not feel overly, maybe not think too much about the fact that you've got to fit into every room. I think every individual is made to be more suitable for some situations and some rooms than the others. If you find those rooms, we are lucky. We are blessed, and so we continue our journey to find similar rooms and feel more belonged there.
You've spoken about when you moved to the UK, and you've told me before that you had to soften your style to fit in. But since you've learnt to lean back into that, and I definitely sense that today, what changed for you?
I think, funnily enough, I think what changed for me was what people told me about how I work. I think because when I just moved and I started, my business, and it was all very new territory for me. And not just in terms of, creating your own business, because that itself is a hard journey, but I think just in general, people and, the way people spoke. And it took me a couple of years to get to grips with the Yorkshire accent, for instance. So all of that was very new to me, and all of that. So while I was getting to grips with it, finding my space, I kind of realized that and some people told me that, I'm coming across as being too direct and, too out there. You're kind of explaining the problem in 2 sentences. You're not supposed to do that in this country. You're supposed to go round and round and round and then maybe explain the problem. And it was a mindset that I was not familiar with, because I guess culturally, Asia or India at least, we work at a very different trend and a very different sort of lane, where time is everything. So you can't waste time in explaining the problem in 5 sentences. You just have one sentence, you explain it properly, and you move on, So I think I obviously came with that experience to this country. And then I was told that, oh, no, you need to wrap it around a bit, you can't just be so direct. People will think that you're arrogant. So I really kind of took lots of steps back and be like, okay, I'm going to be very soft, very gentle, very, and obviously that worked for me in the sense that it helped me become more part of the culture of this country, and it helped me become more in line or in tune with how other people think. But then in the past few years, it so happened that I've had the absolute privilege of working on some really amazing, groundbreaking infrastructure work within the third sector, within the arts and culture sector, within even the sort of healthcare system. And I think there were some real problems that we had to address. And obviously I was still being extremely conscious of how I address it and how I define it. But then I realized that ultimately, if we do really want results, and if we really want us to move from point A to point B, then there's absolutely no way that we can fluff our way around it. We've got to address the problem as it is. We've got to define the problem as it is, and then find a solution that works for the problem. So it became a little bit of a values conversation for me, is that I've got to be more upfront and clear about how I communicate the problem, how I communicate the solution, and how I communicate that accountability. And so subconsciously I leaned into my previous version, and it worked. It gave us tremendous results. And one of the sort of common feedback that I got from all those chunky bits of work that we did was, oh, we really liked that you're assertive, you're fair, but you get us, to bring about change in a lovely, inclusive manner, which can show results. I can go back, I can kind of crawl a little back in, and pick up myself, pick up the true, authentic person that I am, and not be embarrassed about it, and not be, kind of ashamed about it, but stand tall and be proud about it. Because people like it.
Fantastic. I can't wait to chat about Firefly at some point with you.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
we'll pick that up
definitely.
later. But how do you sort of balance this sense of needing to conform, or that we want to conform in society, with really being authentically you? How do you balance that?
I think I balance that by probably reminding myself constantly that we're all a work in progress. I think as soon as we get tied down to I'm either this or that, I think that's when the trouble starts happening, and that's where you kind of make life difficult for yourself. I think for me personally, and it's going to be different for every individual, because we all have our own unique journeys that we all navigated through. But I guess for me, it is that being okay about who you are, being comfortable about who you are, B, knowing that you're flawed, knowing that you can make mistakes, you're still learning, you're still, open for errors. And then C, fully acknowledging that being in uncomfortable spaces will mean that you are being challenged in terms of either you're conforming or you're not. And all of that, ultimately, if you kind of add it all into one lovely jigsaw puzzle, it's all just connecting the dots and making you become a stronger, a better version of yourself. And I'm not going to lie and say that, well, in every situation I've got these handy mindset tools that I tap into. I think there are times when I do conform subconsciously because it's easier, it's more available. And sometimes I do challenge the norm. I do challenge the status quo. In both these situations, I feel slightly uncomfortable. When I conform and I leave a room, I'm like, what did I just do? Why didn't I raise my hand, and why didn't I, say, well, that's not right. I sit with myself and be like, okay, you didn't do it. Too bad. Next time, same situation happens, raise your bloody hand. Oh, sorry, raise your hand. So I think it is that allowing yourself the permission to still make those errors, and knowing that you're going to tell yourself that the next time the same situation happens, you are going to try and challenge. And so it is about those micro steps. I don't think I moved from person A to person B overnight. I think it's been a gradual step by step progress to the other version. And even then, I still can fall back to the previous version. So I guess allowing yourself giving yourself permission, to make mistakes, to maybe not do what what you thought you would do, and then telling yourself and reminding yourself, well, next time, just raise that hand. Just try and at least say, I have a different opinion. Hear me out. Or if that's not possible, and if you feel really nervous about the situation, just write it on a piece of paper and be like, I want to give some anonymous feedback. Until you say it, until you ask it, nobody's going to give you anything. So just ask. Just say, can I do this? The maximum that'll come back is a no, you can't, but try.
You've mentioned a few times about values and how important they are to you. We've chatted as well around sort of value-driven consultancy and what that means. And we're definitely still grappling with that. And how does that play out in reality? But what does success look like to you today?
I think success for me looks like a life where I'm making every decision based on my values, where I am not governed or influenced by external people's perception about success, where I'm leading a life that is based on integrity, based on a strong purpose of community, and where every night when I sleep, I can't wait for the next day to begin and for me to get on with my life. I think for me, success is that opportunity to get up the next day, to try and give it my best shot, to influence, potentially have a positive impact on the people I work with, and to build communities that are truly inclusive, truly joyful. And it is a work in progress. And I think I'm very privileged that I feel like I'm potentially living my dream in that sense, that every single day I am leading a successful life because I'm doing exactly all of that. And I also think, to me, success is very much about, yes, having that goal. I've always been a very goal-oriented person, sometimes to my own detriment. But along with having that goal, being extremely conscious of enjoying the ride. I think we can get sometimes too overwhelmed and too stuck on the goal that, we've got to reach this, and be it a business, be it, a job, I've got to reach this by this age. And sometimes life doesn't pan out the way you thought it would. But are you enjoying yourself? Are you bringing joy to yourself? Are you being silly? Are you being playful? Are you looking at, a piece of Lego with curiosity? Those are the moments that really make your life beautiful and memorable. So for me, success is all of that. It is, yes, having that destination, working towards a goal, being very ambitious about that goal, but also not completely losing sight of the day-to-day micro joy moments that you can allow yourself to feel. And in that process, that journey from point A to your goal, are you creating communities, spaces where everybody else feels that joy? Are you creating impact that changes the life of somebody else? Are you sitting with your family and being silly and watching telly? That to me is what success looks like. A life that's filled with purpose, a life that is on a day-to-day reminder of the joy that you can fill your life with. I think so.
Sounds brilliant.
I hope so.
Definitely, more fun. You spoke a bit about inclusion throughout the conversation and inclusive communities. What does inclusion mean to you?
Outside of the textbook definition of inclusion, I think inclusion for me means where every individual feels like they have something to offer. Every individual feels respected for the individual that they are, for the skills that they have, for the lived experience that they come with. For me, inclusion is that it's almost that emotional existence, knowing that you're sat there in a room, not because you are ticking the box for someone, not because, on a piece of paper you look good, but because you fully, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually are good, are great. And that feeling of being respected, of being trusted, of knowing that you are coming into the space to offer value is what I think is, when you say inclusion, that's what I mean, is where every individual feels respected, trusted, valued for whoever they are.
If you could speak to your younger self, and possibly the one that didn't feel like she belonged, what would you tell her?
It's all going to be fine. It'll all work out in a mysteriously magical way. You will have your own story to tell and make your own story. I think when you're younger, at least when I was younger, I was very much governed by making a story that looked similar to somebody else's, because I felt like, well, that they did this and it got them there, I'll do the same thing. But as you grow older and as you create your own memories and you create your own highs and lows in life, you realize that you have your own story to tell. And so my younger self, all I would tell my younger self is that don't be in a rush to make your story look like somebody else's story. It's your story. Own it, and live it fully. Give yourself that chance. Fail, excitingly, fail often. And always come back to who you are, what you mean to people around you, and what value you bring to a certain space. And as long as you are leading a life where you feel that all these questions, the answers to these questions are aligned with your existence, you're doing amazingly well. Don't get too bogged down by people's perceptions about you. Don't get too bogged down by what success should look like because others say so. Especially in today's day and age, I think, the world that we're living in, there's so much of information that's being thrown in at us. I think we can very quickly get lost in all of it. So sometimes it's just, sitting with yourself and saying, well, what does success look like to you? What's your unique story? Live it truly, fully, be silly, be curious. And every single day, just try to be a better version of yourself, and you'll be fine.
Be silly, be curious, and fail. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Minoti, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, talking to you. I learn something every time we speak and feel totally inspired. So I hope our listeners enjoy that conversation.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you so much, Jo. Thank you for having me. It's been amazing.
Brilliant. Thanks for listening to Against the Tide, brought to you by Jo Metcalf and Louise Kavanagh. We're grateful to the team at Sticks and Glass in Leeds and Bison Studios in London, our inspiring guests and wonderful listeners. Subscribe to Against the Tide wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.